If you're waiting to feel ready, you'll never move because your brain isn't built for comfort. It's built for survival. And survival doesn't reward the passive. It rewards the adaptable, the ones who learn to take action even when it hurts. Your mind will lie to you. It will say, rest a little longer. You deserve a break. Maybe tomorrow. That's not your potential speaking. That's your limbic system trying to keep you safe. But growth never happens in the safe zone. You want to level up. Then you need to force your focus. Train your attention like a muscle. Because when you can control where your focus goes, your behavior follows. And behavior builds habits, and habits shape identity. Neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to rewire itself, only activates when you step outside your comfort zone. You don't change by thinking. You change by doing again and again until your brain realizes this is who we are now. When you face resistance, when it's hard to show up, hard to train, hard to study, that's when the transformation is happening at the cellular level. Your neurons are literally struggling to form new connections. Struggle is the signal. Dopamine, your motivation chemical, isn't just about reward. It's about effort toward reward. You feel the deepest satisfaction not when it's easy, but when it was earned. The longer the path, the more meaningful the prize. So stop waiting for inspiration. You don't need more motivation. You need to move regardless of how you feel. Build systems. Create rituals. Anchor your habits to reality. Don't negotiate with weakness. Override it. Every time you push through, you're sending a signal to your brain. I'm not the same as I was yesterday. And that signal becomes a pattern. That pattern becomes your identity. And that identity becomes your future. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. So build systems that force you to level up, not when it's easy, not when you're motivated, but especially when it's hard. That's where greatness is built. That's where your future begins. Level up or stay stuck. The choice is biological, and it's yours. The brain responds to challenge, not comfort. This is not just a motivational line, it's a biological fact. The human nervous system, from its most ancient structures to the most evolved parts of the cerebral cortex, has been shaped not by ease, but by adversity. Your brain is a dynamic, ever-changing system that reorganizes itself in response to input. And the strongest, most lasting changes come when that input is demanding. When you expose yourself to challenge, physically, mentally, or emotionally, you send a signal to your brain that adaptation is necessary for survival. That's when the brain turns on its growth machinery. Most people live in a bubble of routine and predictability. They avoid discomfort, thinking that safety equals stability. But what they don't realize is that comfort is a silent killer of progress. Your brain has no reason to change if you don't give it one. Without friction, there's no reason for your neurons to form new connections. Without effort, there's no reason for your attention systems to rewire. Without struggle, there's no internal signal that says, we need to get stronger. Your biology is efficient. It doesn't waste resources unless it's told there's a need. And that signal, the call to level up, only comes when you put yourself under stress intentionally and repeatedly. Think about how muscles grow. You don't build strength by lifting what's easy. You grow when you push into resistance, when you fail reps, when the fibers tear and rebuild stronger. The brain works the same way. Cognitive and emotional resilience are built by pushing through what's hard, not by avoiding it. You want to think better, focus longer, become more disciplined. Then you must train your brain through experience, not theory. And experience only counts when it challenges you. Inside your brain is a complex web of circuits, sensory pathways, motor outputs, emotional regulators, memory systems, and more. All of them are shaped by how you live. And challenge is what forces these circuits to reconfigure. When you stay comfortable, you use the same neural routes over and over. They become more efficient, yes, but at the cost of flexibility. You become neurologically rigid. But when you challenge yourself, when you choose the harder task, resist the urge to quit, fight the inner pull to stay still, your brain enters a plastic state. In that state, you're reshaping who you are. You're not just getting through the moment. You're building a new structure inside your mind that will support your next level. This is especially important in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, focus, decision-making, and impulse control. When you challenge yourself, this region becomes more active. It learns to suppress the emotional brain that screams, give up, or it's too much. And the more you do it, the stronger that control gets. You start making decisions from your future self, not your current emotion. That's what separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. The truth is, challenge increases capacity. When you stretch your limits, you don't just expand them temporarily. You redefine what's normal for your brain. The task that felt overwhelming a week ago becomes manageable. What used to drain your energy becomes automatic. You build tolerance not because the world gets easier, but because you got stronger. But none of that happens by accident. You have to force it. You have to seek it. You have to reframe challenge as an opportunity, not a threat. Biologically, this shift matters. When you face a challenge, your brain releases neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and dopamine. These chemicals heighten focus and motivation. But they only spike in response to effort. Passive consumption doesn't activate them. Scrolling, daydreaming, hoping things improve without action, none of that engages the systems required for growth. But when you do the thing you didn't feel like doing, when you study for one more hour, push one more rep, or sit in focused work despite the discomfort, your brain rewards that effort. Not instantly, but through reinforcement. It says, that's the path to progress. And over time, it becomes easier to choose the hard road because your brain now sees it as the rewarding one. There's a reason elite performers put themselves through structured challenge. Athletes, soldiers, entrepreneurs, scientists, they all design their environments to be just difficult enough to trigger adaptation. They don't run from stress. They build a relationship with it. They use it to forge discipline, to test limits, to cultivate presence. And every time they push the boundary, their brain changes. That's not motivational fluff. It's neuroscience. You become what you repeat, and if what you repeat is avoidance, your brain becomes excellent at quitting. If what you repeat is effort, your brain becomes excellent at pushing. You cannot evolve while staying comfortable. There's no such thing as a new you without new inputs. You have to train the systems of your brain just like you would train your body, by introducing stress that's high enough to stretch you but not break you. You don't need to suffer endlessly, but you do need to be uncomfortable regularly, because that discomfort tells your biology we're becoming something more. And the moment your brain receives that message, everything begins to change. So if you want to level up, if you want to become more focused, more consistent, more capable, then stop seeking comfort. Start seeking challenge. Not because it feels good, but because it rewires your mind. The brain responds to challenge, not comfort. That's the rule. That's the path. That's how you rise. Neuroplasticity requires effort. The human brain is not a fixed structure. It is a dynamic, adaptable organ that reshapes itself based on the behaviors, thoughts, and actions you engage in repeatedly. But it doesn't change just because you want it to. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections, demands energy, repetition, and most importantly, effort. You cannot just sit still and wish for growth. You have to earn it through intentional discomfort. The brain only changes when it perceives that change is essential for survival, adaptation, or progress. And the only way it perceives that need is when you push yourself to operate at the edge of your current ability. When you repeat easy tasks, your brain becomes efficient at those specific actions, but it doesn't grow. Efficiency is not the same as development. True development happens when you are challenged, when you attempt something difficult, when you fail, when you persist anyway. That's when your neurons begin to fire in new patterns. That's when new synaptic connections are formed. But this process requires energy. It requires biochemical investment, resources that your brain won't allocate unless it sees a meaningful reason to do so. That reason is created through focused effort. Effort is the biological trigger that says, this matters. Let's adapt. Every time you practice something difficult, especially when it's something you're not good at yet, your brain enters a state of heightened plasticity. But this state doesn't last forever. It's a window, a limited opportunity, and you have to make use of it. Focus is critical here. When you attempt something hard with full attention, your brain begins to encode the experience in a way that strengthens the neural pathways involved. The more intense and intentional the focus, the more powerful the signal for neuroplasticity. This is why mindless repetition doesn't lead to growth. It's effort with awareness that creates lasting change. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing more with purpose. Think of a student studying for an exam. One student may spend 5 hours distracted, checking their phone every few minutes. Another may spend 1 hour fully locked in, resisting all temptation to break focus. Neurologically, the second student's brain is far more likely to change in a meaningful way, because neuroplasticity isn't driven by time, it's driven by the intensity of attention and the emotional relevance of the task. When something feels important and you give it your full cognitive effort, the brain registers it as an experience worth wiring in. But effort also means encountering failure. And that's a critical part of the process. When you try, struggle, and fail, your brain goes into a deeper mode of learning. It starts asking, what went wrong? What can we improve? This activates what's known as the error correction system, which is essential for growth. Your brain doesn't grow from success, it grows from correction. And correction only comes when you stretch yourself far enough to get it wrong. So if you're afraid of failing, you're actually preventing your brain from adapting. You're shutting off the very mechanism that makes you better. What's even more powerful is that effort-based neuroplasticity begins to rewire your identity. Every time you push through discomfort, your brain updates its model of who you are. It begins to believe, I am the kind of person who does hard things. This shift is profound because your identity drives your future behavior. If you believe you are lazy, your brain will filter your options through that lens. But if you teach it through consistent effort that you are capable, disciplined, and relentless, then it will begin to favor those choices automatically. That is long-term plasticity, where effort not only changes your skill set, but also your self-image. This concept is the foundation of all personal growth. Whether you're learning an instrument, developing a new habit, starting a business, or building physical endurance, the same rule applies. You must engage in effortful practice to change your brain. You have to enter the zone where things are not easy, where mistakes happen, where your ego is challenged. That's the sweet spot for neuroplasticity. That's where the rewiring happens. And the more often you visit that space, the more capable your brain becomes of learning, adapting, and evolving. But here's the part most people overlook: effort must be sustained. A single burst of energy is not enough. The brain needs repetition to stabilize its new connections. That means you can't just do something hard once and expect permanent change. You have to keep showing up again and again, especially when it's not fun. Especially when you feel like quitting. That's when your brain says, this isn't a phase. This is who we are now. And that's when the transformation locks in. That's when neuroplasticity goes from temporary to permanent. The good news is this: once a new pathway is established, it becomes easier to activate. Habits become automatic. Focus becomes sharper. Emotional control improves. Not because you were born with those abilities, but because you earned them through repeated effort. This is the science of self-reinvention. You don't need a new environment, a new personality, or a perfect plan. You need to engage in focused, repeated, and difficult practice. That's it. That's how the brain grows. That's how you grow. Effort is the price of evolution, and neuroplasticity is the reward. But you must be willing to pay that price every single day. You must be willing to choose discomfort when convenience is available. You must be willing to struggle even when no one is watching, because the changes happening inside you are real, even if they're invisible for now. Every moment of deliberate effort is etching new lines into your neural map. And over time, those lines become the blueprint of the person you're becoming. Effort is not a burden. It's the doorway to your next level. And the only way to step through it is to show up and give everything you've got. Not once, not twice, but consistently, relentlessly, with purpose and belief, because that's what it takes to change your brain and your life. Dopamine is earned, not given. That's a truth many people don't fully understand. In today's world, dopamine has become misunderstood, oversimplified as just the feel-good chemical, something you get from likes on social media, sugary food, entertainment, or other quick hits of pleasure. But biologically, dopamine wasn't designed to reward laziness or instant gratification. Its core function is to motivate action. It's not there to celebrate comfort. It's there to drive effort toward reward. It fuels the pursuit, the grind, the process of overcoming difficulty. And when you earn it through work, the reward feels deeper, more satisfying, and most importantly, it reinforces a growth-oriented identity. When dopamine is released in response to real effort, your brain makes a connection. This struggle was worth it. That's how powerful habits are formed. You reinforce not just the action, but your belief in your ability to act. This cycle of effort, followed by earned reward, trains your brain to seek challenge. But the opposite is also true. When you constantly consume dopamine passively, through endless scrolling, easy pleasures, or escaping work, you train your brain to chase ease. And ease never leads to growth. Over time, your dopamine system becomes desensitized. It takes more stimulation to feel the same level of reward. That's why people burn out on the things that once excited them. Their reward system was hijacked by unearned pleasure. The key is understanding that dopamine is about anticipation and pursuit more than it is about the final result. It spikes when you're working toward a meaningful goal, when you're in motion, when you're focused, when you're sacrificing short-term comfort for long-term gain. That's when your brain says, keep going. It motivates you to persist. This is why working on a difficult task that matters to you, something that aligns with your goals or values, can feel incredibly energizing even when it's exhausting. It's your brain saying, this is worth the effort. But if you skip the effort and go straight to the reward, say binging a show, eating junk, or chasing likes, you might feel a brief hit of satisfaction, but it fades fast, and it leaves behind fatigue, not fulfillment. Effort-based dopamine is sustainable. It builds resilience, strengthens focus, and supports long-term ambition. It teaches your brain to associate pleasure with the process, not just the prize. And that is the difference between people who stay driven for years and those who burn out quickly. The ones who last have trained their reward system to enjoy the work, not just the outcome. They find meaning in the repetition, the grind, the challenge. Because deep down, they understand that the dopamine isn't a gift, it's earned. This understanding gives you power. When you wake up tired and choose to get after your goals anyway, you're reinforcing the neural pathways of discipline. When you show up to train, study, build, or create despite the temptation to relax, your brain begins to adapt. Over time, you start craving effort, not because it's fun, but because you know that's where the real rewards live. You shift from being a passive consumer of dopamine to an active creator of it. You control when and how it gets released. That's what separates average performance from elite performance. But this also means you have to become very intentional with your environment and your habits. If you flood your system with cheap dopamine all day, notifications, junk food, low-effort entertainment, you're conditioning yourself to avoid anything that feels hard. Hard things won't feel worth it anymore because your brain is used to high reward, low effort loops. That's a dangerous cycle. It kills drive. It weakens focus. It turns discomfort into something you fear instead of something you embrace. And once that happens, your goals begin to feel impossible. Not because they are, but because your brain has been trained to resist the very process required to reach them. So the solution is to reverse the pattern. Delay gratification. Control your inputs. Make effort the trigger for reward. Wake up and don't touch your phone. Do the work first. Earn your dopamine. When you complete a difficult task, writing that paragraph, solving that problem, pushing through your workout, then reward yourself. Let your brain learn that pleasure follows effort. That rest is earned. That satisfaction comes from contribution, not consumption. This is how you reset your reward system. It's how you train yourself to love the climb. And when this becomes your baseline, everything changes. You stop needing motivation to act. You don't wait for inspiration. You act first. You train your nervous system to move even when it's hard. And you get your dopamine hit from doing what others avoid. That's when discipline becomes automatic. That's when ambition becomes a lifestyle, not a temporary feeling. You begin to rewire the deepest parts of your identity, not with words, but with repetition. Action becomes your default. Sacrifice becomes your habit. And every drop of dopamine is earned, which means it's valued. In a world addicted to shortcuts, instant rewards, and the easy way out, this mindset gives you an edge. Because most people are unknowingly sabotaging their own potential by chasing dopamine without effort. They feel burned out, distracted, and directionless, not realizing it's because their reward system has been hijacked by comfort. But you can choose differently. You can decide to link pleasure with progress. You can make dopamine your ally instead of your master. And when you do that, nothing feels more satisfying than the hard work itself. The gym session you didn't want to do, the page you didn't feel like writing, the habit you pushed through when it felt pointless, those are the moments your brain grows. Those are the moments that earn you the chemistry of fulfillment. So remember, this dopamine is not about getting what you want instantly. It's about the pursuit of what matters. It's about action in the face of resistance. And when you condition your brain to release dopamine in response to effort, you become unstoppable. Not because the path is easy, but because the struggle becomes your source of power. Dopamine is earned, not given. So earn it every single day. Your brain rewards you for action, not just for thinking about action. This is a critical truth that many people overlook in their quest for change, growth, or success. The modern world is filled with information, books, videos, podcasts, motivational content, and while all of this can be helpful, none of it rewires your brain unless it is paired with actual behavior. Thinking about being disciplined is not discipline. Planning to be productive is not productivity. Reading about focus is not focus. The brain doesn't evolve from intention. It evolves from execution. It changes based on what you do, not just what you hope to do. Every action you take sends a signal to your nervous system. This is who we are. This is what we do. Repeated action becomes identity, and identity becomes automatic behavior. There's a biological mechanism behind this. When you take a purposeful action, especially one that involves effort or challenge, your brain releases neurochemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. These chemicals heighten your alertness, improve your memory of the task, and reinforce the behavior as important. In other words, your brain encodes the action as meaningful and worth repeating. But if you just sit and think about doing something, no matter how detailed or passionate your thoughts, maybe your brain doesn't register that as a real experience. No neurochemical cascade, no learning, no reward. You might feel good imagining the success, but that dopamine hit is misleading. It tricks you into feeling accomplished without having accomplished anything. This is why many people stay stuck in cycles of overthinking, procrastination, and self-doubt. They confuse thought with movement. They get trapped in endless preparation, believing that they need to feel more confident or more inspired before they act. But that's not how the system works. Confidence doesn't come first. Action comes first. Clarity doesn't come before you start. It comes through the process of doing. Your brain calibrates itself through experience, through friction, through feedback from the real world. When you move, even imperfectly, your brain begins to adapt. It creates new connections, reinforces new behaviors, and builds momentum. You literally become the person who takes action by taking action. There is a concept in neuroscience called Hebbian learning, often summed up by the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. What this means is that when you repeat a behavior, the neural pathways responsible for that behavior strengthen. Over time, they become more efficient, faster, and more automatic. So every time you choose to act instead of think, every time you take the first step instead of waiting, you are literally rewiring your brain to favor that kind of response. This is how habits are built, not through motivation or willpower alone, but through repeated execution. The brain rewards patterns, not promises. But this also means your brain is always learning something, even when you choose not to act. If you repeatedly hesitate, delay, or retreat, your brain is wiring in avoidance. It's getting better at backing down, better at staying still. You're training your system to associate discomfort with danger rather than opportunity. This is why action must be taken, especially when it's hard, because those are the moments when the rewiring matters most. That's when the signal to your brain is the strongest. When you act in the face of resistance, your brain learns this is safe. This is who I am now. And over time, that becomes your default response. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Even small, consistent actions trigger this adaptive response. Writing one paragraph, doing one workout, making one difficult phone call. These actions may seem small in the moment, but to your brain, they're powerful signals of identity. Every time you act with purpose, you reinforce the wiring of someone who moves forward. And the brain begins to prefer that path. It starts to reward you earlier in the process, not just when you succeed, but when you begin. That's the turning point when your system starts releasing dopamine during the pursuit, not just the outcome. That's how momentum is built. That's how drive becomes sustainable. One of the most important shifts you can make is learning to trust this process. Stop waiting to feel ready. Ready is a myth. The neurochemical state you're waiting for doesn't come before the action. It's created by the action. The courage, the focus, the energy, they get triggered after you take the first step. So the key is to shrink the gap between thought and behavior. The faster you act on your decisions, the more you train your brain to be decisive. You teach your nervous system to associate ideas with movement. You collapse the delay between knowing and doing. And in that space, you build a life that actually moves forward. Another layer to this is how your brain reacts to feedback. When you act, you expose yourself to reality. You get data, results, failures, resistance, reactions. That feedback loop is essential for growth. It helps your brain course correct. It shows you what works and what doesn't. But if you never act, you never get that loop. You live in a theoretical world where everything is possible, but nothing is proven. Action grounds you. It keeps you honest. It gives your brain the raw material it needs to improve. So even when your action leads to mistakes, that's still progress. Your brain doesn't grow from perfection. It grows from correction. And correction requires movement. What this all comes down to is a mindset shift. Don't overvalue thought and undervalue execution. Don't wait to feel like the kind of person who takes action. Become that person by acting. Let your brain learn who you are through what you do, not what you imagine. You don't need more time. You don't need more planning. You need to move. Your brain will follow. And the more you move, the more your brain will reward you for it. That's how motivation is created. That's how discipline is born. Not through inspiration, but through repeated action that teaches your system, this is what we do. In the end, your brain doesn't care about your dreams, your goals, or your vision boards unless they are followed by consistent behavior. It only rewires itself when you step into the arena, when you stop rehearsing and start doing. So don't just think about what needs to be done. Do it. Let your brain catch up. Let it rewire in response to action. That's the path to lasting change. That's how you level up one step at a time, one decision at a time. And with every step, your brain will reward you not just with progress, but with the identity of someone who moves. The nervous system thrives on challenge. It's not designed for stagnation, and it's not optimized by comfort. The human brain and body evolved to adapt, to overcome, and to grow in response to stress, but only the right kind of stress. This is the key idea. Growth doesn't come from random pressure, it comes from intentional challenge. The kind of challenge that stretches you just beyond your current capabilities. Not so far that you break, but far enough that your system has to adapt. This process is known as neuroplasticity, and it's one of the most powerful mechanisms your body has to level up. Mentally, physically, emotionally. But it only activates when you step into discomfort on purpose. When you push against resistance with your full focus. When you challenge your limits, not once in a while, but consistently. That's how the nervous system rewires. That's how strength is built, not just muscle strength, but emotional resilience, cognitive capacity, and self-control. If you want to grow, you must understand this. Your nervous system needs stress signals in order to evolve. These signals come from friction, from deliberate effort, from engaging in tasks that require skill, effort, and repetition. When you lift weights that challenge your muscles, the muscles tear microscopically, and the body responds by rebuilding them stronger. The nervous system works the same way. When you focus intensely on a difficult task, when you resist temptation, when you stay calm in chaos, you create controlled strain. That strain becomes the input your system uses to grow. Without it, you atrophy, not just physically, but mentally. You become less capable, less focused, less tolerant of discomfort. Comfort becomes your default. And that is the slow death of growth. Controlled discomfort, repeated over time, is the trigger for transformation. Think about that. The nervous system needs to be reminded regularly that challenge is safe, that pushing through pain won't kill you, that discomfort is not danger, it's opportunity. When you deliberately expose yourself to short bursts of strain, be it through a cold shower, a hard workout, deep work, or even social challenge, you are sending a powerful signal to your brain: adapt or fall behind. And the brain listens, it reorganizes pathways, it increases connectivity, it sharpens focus. You don't just feel stronger, you become stronger at the neurological level. Your reactions change, your tolerance increases. You become someone who can handle more pressure with less emotional reactivity. That's how mental toughness is born. That's how elite performance is developed, not through genetics, not through luck, through the nervous system's response to voluntary challenge. But this doesn't happen by accident. It requires intention. You have to seek out friction. You have to deliberately do what's hard, not once, but every day. Wake up earlier than you want to. Work longer than you're comfortable with. Say no to distractions. Do the workout. Face the fear. Speak up when your voice shakes. Put yourself in situations that stretch you, not break you. That's the key. Controlled exposure. The sweet spot is just beyond your current limit. Not in the red zone of panic, but not in the comfort zone of autopilot either. It's the zone where your nervous system is fully engaged, fully present, and fully committed to adaptation. That's where the magic happens. That's where growth lives. Understand this: the nervous system is not your enemy. It's not something to fight against. It's something to train. It's a system of potential waiting to be unlocked, but you must give it the right signals. You must become fluent in the language of discomfort. You must stop running from stress and start managing it. Stress isn't the problem. Mismanagement is. Chronic stress from indecision, avoidance, and overstimulation damages the system, but acute, intentional stress from focused effort builds it. The difference is in the control. One breaks you down, the other builds you up. And the more you train your nervous system through intentional challenge, the more adaptable you become. That's the real advantage. Not perfection, not fearlessness, adaptability. The ability to stay composed under pressure. The ability to shift gears when needed. The ability to focus when the world is chaotic. That's what separates those who rise from those who remain stuck. Their nervous system is more trained. Not because life gave them easier conditions, but because they exposed themselves to voluntary stress over and over until the hard became normal, until the pressure became fuel. This kind of training doesn't require huge life changes. It requires daily decisions. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Speak the truth when it's uncomfortable. Delay the reward. Push through one more rep. Focus for 5 more minutes. These small acts of resistance are not meaningless. They are the very actions that stimulate your nervous system to get sharper, faster, tougher. Each one is a neural rep. And just like in the gym, reps add up. They accumulate into capacity. They rewire your identity. You become someone who acts despite fear, who shows up despite resistance, who endures despite discomfort. That is how you change, not by waiting to feel different, but by doing differently until your nervous system catches up and adapts to the new normal. At some point, you stop needing external motivation because you've built the internal wiring of resilience. The system has adjusted. It no longer flinches at pressure. It expects it. It welcomes it. Because it knows growth is on the other side. That's when you're free, not free from stress, but free from being controlled by it. You've trained your nervous system to function under load. You've transformed discomfort into data, challenge into training, and fear into feedback. So if you want to level up, don't just focus on goals, focus on stimulus. What are you exposing your nervous system to each day? Are you feeding it passive comfort or active challenge? Are you hiding from resistance or seeking it in controlled doses? Are you letting the world train you randomly, or are you training with intention? The answer will define your trajectory, because your nervous system doesn't lie. It becomes what you repeatedly do. And if you teach it to adapt to pressure, to respond instead of react, to engage instead of retreat, you won't just change how you perform, you'll change who you are. And that's the ultimate upgrade. Pain and discomfort are not just barriers to overcome. They are signals, messengers from your body and mind that real change is happening. When you feel pain, whether physical, emotional, or mental, it's often a sign that you are in the middle of a transition. The nervous system responds to pain by heightening attention, increasing neurochemical release, and initiating adaptive responses. Pain forces presence. It anchors you in the moment and tells your system, this matters. Pay attention. Grow from this. That's why pain must not be avoided but understood and used. You don't have to enjoy it, but you must learn to respect it, because inside that discomfort is data, raw feedback that tells you what needs to be strengthened, what needs to change, and where the edge of growth lies. Your system is not wired to keep you comfortable. It is wired to keep you safe. And many times, the brain cannot distinguish between discomfort that leads to growth and danger that leads to harm. So it reacts to both with the same initial warning signals: hesitation, fear, tension. But that doesn't mean something is wrong. Often, it means something important is happening. Your nervous system is trying to protect you from perceived threat, but if you override that reflex with awareness and intention, you teach your system something new: that not all pain means stop. Some pain means adapt. Some discomfort is not danger, it's development. You rewire your emotional and neurological response to challenge by staying in it long enough to recognize the difference. This is the core of mental resilience, training yourself to interpret discomfort not as a stop sign, but as a green light. You learn to say, this hurts, but it's not harmful. This is hard, but it's not hopeless. This is pressure, but it's also progress. That reframe changes everything. Because once you stop fearing discomfort, it loses its power to control you. Most people spend their lives running from the very signals that could transform them. They avoid feedback, delay action, and retreat from stress, thinking they're protecting themselves. But in doing so, they miss the opportunity to evolve. Pain is not the enemy. Fear of pain is. Discomfort is not weakness. Avoidance of discomfort is. Think about the last time you made a major leap in your life. It didn't happen while you were relaxed. It didn't happen when things were easy. It happened when you were uncertain, overwhelmed, maybe even scared. But you moved forward anyway. And that's what your nervous system remembers. It encodes those moments of high stakes effort into memory. It builds pathways around that pressure. It says, next time this happens, we'll be stronger. We've done this before. The system evolves through stress, but only if you face it with purpose. Random stress breaks people. Structured stress builds them. This is why athletes, soldiers, performers, and high achievers across domains expose themselves to discomfort repeatedly and deliberately. They understand that their edge is sharpened not in comfort, but in tension. They trust that pain is the price of capacity. They learn to sit with the burn, to stay with the frustration, to breathe through the mental fog, because they know what comes next is breakthrough. But here's the truth: you don't have to be an elite anything to apply this. You just have to stop interpreting pain as a stop signal. You have to stop thinking discomfort is a sign to pull back. It's often a sign to lean in, to observe, to learn, to adapt. There is something biologically important that happens when you do this. When you voluntarily face discomfort, especially for a goal you believe in, your brain releases chemicals like dopamine not just after success, but during the process. That means your system begins to associate effort itself with reward. This is a huge shift. Most people wait to feel good after the result. But when you train your nervous system to feel rewarded by effort itself, you become unstoppable. You're no longer dependent on outcomes to feel motivated. The process becomes the reward. And when the process includes discomfort and your brain learns to enjoy the process, you've unlocked a feedback loop that fuels limitless growth. This doesn't mean you chase pain recklessly. It means you embrace the right kind of pain with the right kind of mindset. There's a difference between destructive pain and developmental pain. One injures, the other transforms. Your job is to listen deeply, to recognize what kind of discomfort you're in, and to respond wisely. Rest when the system needs repair, but resist when the system needs challenge. Pain that sharpens focus, that signals a skill gap, that exposes weakness. That's the pain you lean into. That's the pain that forges strength. That's the signal that you are on the edge of leveling up. There's another layer to this. When you consistently face discomfort, you not only rewire your relationship to pain, you also expand your emotional range. You develop a tolerance for intensity. You stop flinching at stress. You learn to hold composure in situations that used to destabilize you. This is not just physical toughness. This is emotional mastery. You train your system to remain calm under pressure. And the more often you do this, the less reactive you become. You gain control. And with control comes confidence, not from pretending to be strong, but from proving to yourself that you can endure and evolve. So, the next time discomfort shows up, pause before you run from it. Sit with it. Observe it. Ask what it's trying to teach you. Maybe it's showing you a weak spot. Maybe it's telling you where you need to train. Maybe it's revealing your next level. Whatever the case, don't waste it. Discomfort is data. Pain is feedback. Use it. Because what you do in the face of discomfort defines your trajectory. You either react, retreat, and repeat the past, or you respond, adapt, and break through to something new. The nervous system remembers every choice. Make the one that leads to growth. In the end, your ability to transform isn't determined by how often you avoid pain. It's determined by how skillfully you move through it. You don't have to love discomfort. You just have to stop fearing it. Because when you stop treating discomfort as your enemy, you discover its true identity, a signal, a teacher, a trigger for transformation. Let it sharpen you. Let it refine you. Let it push you to the edge of what you thought was possible so you can finally step beyond it. Discipline is not motivation. That's the truth most people don't want to hear. Motivation is emotional, fleeting, and often unreliable. It rises and falls based on external circumstances, moods, or temporary inspiration. But discipline is different. It's internal. It's consistent. It's a neural and behavioral framework you build through repetition, structure, and deliberate effort. Discipline doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't require permission or inspiration. It only requires commitment. And if you're serious about leveling up in life, whether that's physically, mentally, or emotionally, then discipline must become your foundation, because your nervous system doesn't optimize for ease, it optimizes for repetition and reward through action. When your habits become hardwired, when your routines become non-negotiable, that's when your nervous system starts to shift, adapt, and evolve. That's when real change becomes permanent. The truth is, your brain doesn't distinguish between what you want and what you repeatedly do. It builds pathways around patterns, not desires. If you consistently avoid discomfort, your system learns that avoidance is safety. If you repeatedly procrastinate, your system encodes hesitation as the norm. But if you train yourself to act, especially when you don't feel like it, you begin to build new circuitry, neural pathways around consistency, around follow-through, around self-control. That's the science behind discipline. Every time you show up when it's hard, when it's inconvenient, when it's uncomfortable, you're not just winning a moment. You're rewiring your nervous system to expect effort, to embrace resistance, to perform under pressure. That's where the edge is sharpened. Not in the moments of excitement, but in the grind of repetition. This is why high performers don't wait for motivation. They build systems, routines, triggers, environments that reinforce their values and keep them on track regardless of how they feel. The disciplined mind doesn't argue with itself every morning. It doesn't waste energy debating whether to train, study, build, or create. It simply executes. Because discipline is a form of automation, deliberately chosen and forged through repetition. Your nervous system thrives on this kind of clarity. It wants to know what's expected. It wants to adapt. But it can only do that if you're consistent. Sporadic effort creates confusion. Consistent action creates certainty. And certainty is the signal your system needs to strengthen behavior into identity. But discipline doesn't just live in the big commitments. It lives in the small choices. Every time you delay gratification, every time you say no to distraction, every time you follow through on what you said you'd do, even when no one's watching, you reinforce your internal standard. That standard becomes your baseline. And from that baseline, everything in your life either rises or falls. Your results are a reflection of what you do consistently, not what you do occasionally. And consistency comes from discipline, not emotion. Now here's where the nervous system plays a deeper role. When you act consistently in the face of resistance, your brain starts releasing dopamine, not just for the outcome, but for the process itself. That means effort becomes inherently rewarding. You don't just feel good after finishing the workout, you feel good during it. You don't just feel focused after a deep work session, you feel alert while doing it. This is one of the most powerful shifts a human being can make. When your nervous system learns to associate effort with reward, you no longer need external motivation. You become intrinsically driven. And once you're intrinsically driven, you're unstoppable. Because now the discipline itself becomes fuel. And this doesn't happen overnight. It happens over weeks, months, years of showing up, especially when it's hard, especially when no one's clapping for you, especially when the progress is invisible. Because discipline teaches you patience. It teaches you to trust process over impulse. It teaches you to become the kind of person who follows through, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. That shift in self-identity rewires your nervous system to handle more stress, more pressure, and more complexity. You no longer break under load. You perform under it. There's another level here. When you train discipline long enough, it stops feeling like control and starts feeling like freedom. Most people think discipline is restriction, but it's the opposite. Indiscipline is chaotic. It makes you reactive, scattered, emotional. You lose time, focus, health, and potential. But disciplined living brings clarity. It simplifies choices. It strengthens your ability to say no, and every no to distraction becomes a yes to your evolution. This is why people who operate with extreme discipline often appear calm, because their nervous system isn't overstimulated by decision fatigue or emotional chaos. They've trained their systems to stay locked in. That calmness is earned through daily repetition. So the question becomes, how do you build that level of discipline? You start small, you choose one behavior that aligns with who you want to become, not 5. 1. And you do it every day, not just when you feel like it. You make it a rule, a non-negotiable. You create the neural circuitry through action, not intention. You keep showing up, you track your behavior, you remove friction. You design your environment, you reward effort, not just results. And slowly your nervous system catches on. The resistance fades. The behavior becomes easier. It becomes automatic. And then you level up again. You don't build discipline by waiting. You build it by acting before you're ready, by moving before motivation arrives, by choosing action over comfort. Every discipline choice sends a message to your nervous system. This is who I am now. I'm the kind of person who doesn't quit. I'm the kind of person who honors my commitments. I'm the kind of person who trains my mind and body regardless of how I feel. That message repeated enough times rewires everything, your perception, your tolerance, your identity. Discipline is not a trait, it's a skill. It's built like strength, trained like endurance, and earned like trust, one rep at a time, one day at a time, through friction, repetition, and consistency. If you want to level up, don't chase motivation, build discipline. Because motivation is a spark, discipline is the engine. And if your nervous system is trained to run on that engine, nothing can stop you. Not fatigue, not emotion, not fear. You'll move forward anyway. That's what separates the average from the elite. That's what builds mastery. That's what rewires you into someone who doesn't just dream of progress, but demands it, lives it, and executes it every single day. Your identity is not fixed. It's not some unchangeable truth you were born with. It's a system of patterns, behaviors, memories, and decisions your brain and body have built over time through repetition and feedback. Who you are today is not a final product. It's a snapshot of your nervous system's adaptations up until this point. And if you want to level up, if you want to become someone stronger, smarter, more capable, it starts with understanding this identity is not found, it's forged. And it's forged through action. Not thoughts, not intentions, not feelings. Action. What you do consistently becomes who you are. The nervous system doesn't respond to wishful thinking, it responds to behavior. It builds neural pathways around the things you do most, and then it automates those things to preserve energy. That means if you want to change who you are, you don't start by trying to think like a different person. You start by acting like one. Behavior first, identity second. Every time you take action aligned with the person you want to become, your nervous system pays attention. It says, this is new. This matters. Let's make this easier next time. That's neuroplasticity in real time, your brain changing in response to your choices. The more you repeat the action, the more it reinforces that identity. At first, it feels forced, unnatural, even fake. But that's not because it's wrong. It's because your nervous system hasn't caught up yet. It's still wired for your old patterns. But over time, the system adapts. The action feels less foreign. The behavior becomes smoother. And eventually what once felt like effort becomes automatic. That's the identity shift. It's not a moment, it's a process. And that process is physical. It's chemical. It's real. Too many people think identity is something you discover. But discovery is passive. You don't sit around waiting to stumble upon a better version of yourself. You build it, you sculpt it, one choice at a time. The nervous system doesn't care about who you want to be. It cares about what you repeatedly do. You can call yourself disciplined, but if your behavior is inconsistent, your system will not believe you. You can say you're driven, but if your actions show hesitation, your system won't register that as truth. The brain keeps score and it doesn't lie. That's why you have to lead with behavior. If you want to be someone who wakes up early, then get out of bed the moment your alarm goes off. Not once, every day. If you want to be someone who's fit, move your body with intensity even when it's hard. If you want to be someone who's focused, build the habits that eliminate distraction and reward deep work. It's simple, not easy, but simple. Your nervous system is plastic, it can be molded, but it requires consistency, it needs repetition, and it needs feedback. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you teach your system that your words don't matter, that your intentions are weak. But every time you follow through, even in small ways, you reinforce a powerful internal signal, I can trust myself. That's the root of self-confidence, not arrogance, not false belief. But earn trust in your ability to act in alignment with your goals. That trust builds momentum, and that momentum becomes identity. One of the most powerful ways to solidify identity change is to link it with emotion. The nervous system remembers experiences that are emotionally intense. So when you act in alignment with your desired identity, attach emotion to it. Feel the pride, feel the clarity, feel the energy. Don't just go through the motions, experience them. Your nervous system encodes those signals more deeply. The more emotionally charged your behavior is, the faster the system learns. This is why high performers often ritualize their actions. They don't just train. They immerse themselves, they feel the work, they make it meaningful. And that meaning makes it memorable. That's how identity becomes sticky. But it's not just about adding new behaviors. It's also about removing the ones that no longer serve you. Your current identity is not just built on what you do, it's also built on what you tolerate. The excuses, the delays, the negative self-talk. If you want to become someone new, you have to cut ties with the old version. You have to create friction between who you were and who you are becoming. That means letting go of stories that limit you. I'm not a morning person. I've never been consistent. I always procrastinate. Those aren't facts. They're scripts your nervous system has memorized through repetition. If you keep repeating them, you keep reinforcing them. But if you interrupt the pattern with new action, you create an opening. And that opening is where the new identity begins to form. It's not about pretending, it's about practicing. You don't have to believe you're someone new right away. You just have to act like it long enough for the system to catch up. And it will. Because your brain is designed to adapt, it just needs a clear signal. Not a perfect plan, not a dramatic transformation, just daily, repeated proof that you are no longer who you used to be. Over time, those actions stack up. They become habits. Habits become patterns. Patterns become identity, and that identity becomes the baseline for everything else you do. It shapes your goals, your standards, your reactions, your decisions. It's the lens through which your entire life is filtered. So if you want to level up, start with who you want to become. Define it clearly, then reverse engineer the behaviors that version of you would perform every day. What would they do first thing in the morning? How would they speak? What would they say no to? What would they prioritize? Then act like that person immediately, not tomorrow, not when it feels right. Now, every moment you do, you send a signal to your nervous system. This is who I am now. The system will resist at first. That's normal. It's protecting old patterns. But with enough consistency, it will yield. It will reshape. It will adapt. You're not stuck with who you've been. Your identity is not your destiny. It's your starting point. And the path to who you want to become is built with behavior. Action is the catalyst. Repetition is the tool, and your nervous system is the medium. Sculpt it with intention. Train it with discipline. And you will emerge not just as someone who wants more, but someone who has become more. Not by accident, not by luck, but by design,